Welcome to the Catholic Dadcast by Rich Pintang, where we break down all things dad from a Catholic perspective. Now more than ever, we need dads to step up their game. Gentlemen, buckle up and get ready for battle. Brothers and sisters, friends and family, welcome to another recording of the Catholic Dadcast. We are in season 2, broadcasting from sunny Southern California, hot and humid, and enjoying the crazy weather. Today's episode is a fun one. I tell you, I feel very fortunate that I was able to connect with these gentlemen. And based on the project itself, I think it's going to be very intriguing for a lot of you dads that want to give something special to the boys and the men in our lives. Today, I have guests here to talk about their book, Milestone to Manhood. And Milestone to Manhood is about the Christian rite of passage to help our 13-year-old son make the leap from boyhood to manhood. And yes, the uncomfortable feeling that and the queasy feeling that you get in your stomach is natural, because for many of us, we're probably going to say that we just never experienced anything like that. And we probably remember some of the awkward things. And basically, in the world we live in today, let's face it, people are trying to redefine what it is to be a man. So that I believe is what was the most important thing for me to recognize in what was going to emerge from our conversation. But brothers and sisters, welcome to the show, David and Stephen Arms. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks for having us.
What is happening? Deacon Dave, you're in the Bay Area, and Steve, you're in the Portland area. What's keeping you guys busy nowadays?
Well, I was recently, about 2 months ago, just ordained after 5 years of formation with the great Archbishop Corleone, and it's an honor to be serving in his archdiocese. I've been assigned to a new parish, and we're fitting in well, and they're just getting used to this new phase in our life, in service to God. So we're really, really praising God for what He's doing in our lives right now.
Yeah, amazing, and thank you for your yes. We know how much of the commitment that is, but for those of us in the laity, it's very inspiring. I can't help but see and hear the testimonies that I've heard of some of the friends that have gone through the diaconate, those that have are just about to, and really how much of that is, it's just really the beginning.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I mean, I was thinking, having this is actually the first time I've actually had 3 people or 2 guests, right? And then on top of that, it's a father-son duo, so that's a cool aspect of it, because based on the book, Milestone to Manhood, based on what I was reading, I feel very fortunate that I get a chance to have this conversation with you guys, because not only does it allow you, for example, Steve, to share your perspective on what this rite of passage meant to you, what it's going to mean to your family, but also for you, Deacon Dave, about what your childhood was like, and why this was something important for you to bestow upon the boys in your life. I mean, Deacon Dave, if you could kind of share with us what it was like growing up, and what you saw in terms of parenting, and what that means to you as how you approached it, raising the boys.
Sure. Thanks, Rich. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my parents actually split up when I was very young. My dad was a strong man. He was a World War II vet. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis actually before I was born, and that disease ended up, ultimately taking him, but he was paralyzed from the neck down as long as I can remember. He ended up moving to Guadalajara, Mexico, where he could afford 24/7 health care. So consequently, my mom raised us. My grandmother came to live with us. So I really didn't have a strong male role model figure in my life till my mom married when I was 15. And by the time you're 15, you're kind of already set in your ways, good or bad. And so I just kind of made this vow to myself that when I got married, that was going to be it. I was going to be married for my whole life, and I was going to committed to being the dad for my kids that I knew that I was called to be.
And that's amazing. And thank you for sharing something so personal, because I think that there are a lot of men that can say, at least from my perspective, some of the conversations I've had with men of various ministries and groups, where they have their perspective of what they wish they had, what they experienced, and how that shaped how they approach parenting. And Steve, for you, I mean, you are you guys are looking at like the fact that this book was written, and you are someone that experienced that. I mean, how do you reflect on like what you've experienced, and how that looks for what it meant for you in your faith journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Rite of Passage weekend for me was one of those things where you don't realize what a blessing it was until many years after. It occurred on my 13th birthday, so I really didn't have anything to compare it to. It wasn't really until I got into my 20s and started to make friends. My friends were getting married, having kids, and they were asking themselves those big questions like, am I a man? Am I a boy? How am I supposed to behave in this world? And I'll never forget, I had a friend ask me, I was probably 25 at the time. He said, Steve, when was the first time that you considered yourself to be a man? And to be honest, no one had ever asked me that question in my life before. And I was basically able to tell him, well, when I was 13, my dad and my grandfather and my uncles basically told me straight up, you're a man now, and ever since then, I just knew like I was a man. I never felt like I had to question that because of what my dad and my grandfather and my uncles did for me. So, at the time as a 13-year-old, I had no idea what a blessing it was. But once I got into my 20s and now that I'm in my 30s, now I'm like, wow, I'm so lucky that I experienced something like this. This is a one in a million type experiences. How many families do something like this?
Imagine. And that amazes me, because that's 17 years later. And I would say that, as you were saying that, Steve, I can't even put my finger on when it was I said, I guess I'm a man now. And that's the beauty of what this Rite of Passage is. I mean, Deacon Dave, if you could share with the audience and the viewers, give them a good understanding of what this Rite of Passage means for a boy going to manhood.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, since I kind of, struggled with this as I was growing up, because I didn't really have that role model and wanted to do that, I sought counsel, wise counsel, from actually my father-in-law, who I saw as a role model, because, he had successfully raised 4 beautiful, faith-filled daughters. And he was just kind of a mentor in every sense of the word. He helped me start a business. He helped me with parenting. He helped me fix things that were broken. He was just that kind of guy, and he was that kind of guy for everybody. So I felt this need that, I really want to play a significant role in the formation of my sons. But how do I do that without the example? And when I talk to guys about, guys my age, about what we had done when our sons were 13, everybody is consistently intrigued by it. And almost every time when we're done talking about it, they'll end up saying, wow, I wish someone had done that for me. So yeah, a big key to it for me was seeking the help of my father-in-law. So we kind of brainstormed about it. And we looked at, rites of passage throughout other cultures. And, we looked at a couple like the Australian Aboriginal walkabout, we looked at the bar mitzvah, and we kind of realized, there's really not a rite of passage, a Christian rite of passage or a Catholic rite of passage. So we felt like we wanted to tailor it to our faith. We wanted to own it. And for that matter, even Western culture doesn't really have a rite of passage, and that's even spilling out into internationally. We have nations that look to our country, that look to the West for guidance and for example. And there's even nations that have these rites of passage that are abandoning them because they're looking to the West now, even though it's not such a great thing. So initially we came up with this book. It was kind of selfish, to be honest with you, because we wanted to do it for our family. But now in retrospect, now that we're done with our family and we've given it to all the sons, nieces, and nephews, we felt that it was important to get this message out on a bigger scale, because society needs, our Western culture needs a rite of passage. We need to affirm men for what and who they are. If we don't, it's going to have negative consequences for them, for those around them, and for society as a whole.
And yeah, I mean, really, if you think about that, it's, if anything, where are they going to learn that virtue, and what does it mean to be a man? And because you're seeing the chaos, the confusion, and that's really the way the devil works. Helping our children and the next generations understand through an experience like this. And in this case, it's a weekend, and this is really can be considered a template of what you can do and why it's so special. And Steve, I mean, for you, fundamentally, this was something that it was a seed planted, but later on, the fruits began to blossom later on in life when it hits you. And from a parent standpoint, I know that I always feel like the kids aren't listening, and I know that later on in life, just like I when I share with them, grandma used to tell me this all the time: a family that prays together stays together. And I would think, I hear it in my head. And so when we're doing our divine mercy or our rosary or whatever it might be, I think this is really the glue that's keeping us and protecting us. Steve, from your standpoint, I mean, I just want to say I could totally tell the awkwardness of when you're writing, like how you're feeling, like, what is this all about? And all the surprises and the unknown. I mean, if you kind of look at what that weekend was for you guys, maybe talk about kind of, the feeling you were getting as a 13-year-old with, for the most part, a bunch of grown men.
Yeah. I tried to write the book from the perspective of a 13-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to share my feelings that I remember from that weekend, because I knew that would be valuable for guys like you, Rich, who have sons of their own. You're in the shoes of a father figure now. So I knew that it would be valuable for guys like you to have the perspective of what your son might be going through, what he might be feeling at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, there definitely was feelings of being uncomfortable, trepidation, not knowing what was going to happen next. When my dad first told me that he wanted to go away on a weekend for my birthday together, any 12-year-old is going to kind of shy away from that. I think that's natural. But there was absolutely an element that intrigued me, that excited me. When my grandfather told me that this weekend is all about you becoming a man, I liked that. I thought, wow, this is really cool. I know that I have an opportunity here to learn a thing or two from guys who have been down this path before, and I knew ultimately that they had my back and they had my best interest in mind, so that I could trust that the advice that they were giving me.
Steve, but I got to ask you, at what point when they said you're a man now, were you like, I'm not a man. I just want to play video games.
Yeah, I would say the beginning of the weekend, at the beginning of the weekend, they were saying, this weekend is all about you becoming a man. And I didn't really know what that meant. Yeah, at the time as a 12-year-old, I was more interested in cartoons and video games. To me, I thought becoming a man was not going to happen until much later in my life. Maybe when I turned 18, then I'd become a man, or maybe when I learned how to drive a car, then I would become a man. So as a 12-year-old on my 13th birthday, I had no idea that this was coming. But in retrospect, I think that it was genius, because it's probably better to introduce your son to manhood too early rather than too late. By the time I was 13, I hadn't really made any major life decisions. But if my dad had waited to tell me I was a man until I was 18 or 25, I wouldn't have had that support and that guidance as I made those big decisions, like where to go to college, what to study, who to marry. So I think in retrospect, it was a good thing that they did it on my 13th birthday and they didn't wait.
It was, and I would say, Deacon Dave, it was very comprehensive as far as the perspectives and the wisdom that Steve would have gotten, and any child would get at that stage of, yeah, they. I mean, I could totally tell that some of our kids would be like, "What does this all mean?" But at the same time, part of that is that relationship that you're building upon trust, our faith, and then aspects of the different rituals and things that you guys did over the weekend. Um, but I do know that it's very concrete, because it's an experience that our kids get to remember. They distinctly remember those things. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily all about what we say, but more about experiences. And they can distinctly say, when I turned 13, this is what we did. And these are the conversations, you know, uh, you know, maybe Deacon Dave, you can talk about kind of how you organized a weekend like this, and a lot of it is in the book in terms of things to follow, and because I would think that there are going to be a lot of men that are very intimidated by planning a weekend like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say, don't be, get over it. There's really a lot of resources out there. The book guides you right through it, step by step. And there's a lot of resources on our website that tell you exactly what to do, when to do it, as far as, I mean, even details down to who to invite. And here's a template email to send them 6 months before the event, 3 months before the event, a month before. I mean, it's just laid out so that it's turnkey. You can pick this up and run with it. And if it's a little bit awkward, so be it. Again, your son is going to look back on this for the rest of his life and say, I remember specifically when I was 13 years old that all these men in my life took the time to do this for me. And but yeah, to get a little more specific about the weekend. And again, I think, Rich, that you use the word template. It's a kind of a template, and that's how we see it. Milestone to Manhood really just helps fathers connect with their sons in this Christian rite of passage. And we set it up to be a blueprint that specifically outlines how to create this. So some of the things that we wanted the weekend, the components that we wanted the weekend to have in it would be, first of all, we wanted it to be quality time. We wanted this to be like, we're going to take you out of your elements so that we can spend, undistracted time away from the normal distractions of life. You can't go to your room and grab the Game Boy, or you can't do this, or, call your buddy or whatever. So we just wanted to get him out of his normal routine. So that's why we always would take them away. So we wanted another component is then that it would be a new experience for him. This is something that was foreign to him. We had never taken him out, on something like this. So that would make an impact on him, something that, would be I guess take him out of his comfort zone would be the best way to describe it.
And that's where we
Um,
grow.
Absolutely. And we wanted there to be an element of surprise. And actually, as you look through the book, you see there are actually several surprises in the book. We felt that, my father-in-law and I felt that it was crucial that we would have, other men affirming this message, not just the father, because, he might not be completely open to what his dad's going to say, but to hear a perspective, same message, different perspective from his grandfather, from his uncle, from older siblings or older cousins, that we knew that we could have a much better chance of getting through to him with multiple men that he trusted. And so, it was just essential for us to be able to share our advice and our wisdom with him, and just to have an open, free, an open, judgment-free discussion with him about these issues.
It's Bobo wisdom, right?
Bobo wisdom.
Like in my head, I was thinking to myself, like, who are the men that I would want on this weekend? Again, with my son Kai being 12, I'm totally picturing, like, as I'm reading your perspective, Steve, the more I'm like thinking, that's what Kai would say, or that's what Kai would think, right? But Steve, for you, I mean, you are the, you're a middle child, right? So I'm thinking that this weekend really helped you not have maybe some of the perspectives that you had as the middle child.
Yeah. Having my dad, my grandfather, and my uncles there, it definitely made me feel special. Um, I felt unique. I felt like I was one of a kind. I could, obviously these guys were taking time out of their busy lives to help me. And so, yeah, I would say as a second child, especially, that made me feel like, wow, these guys are really doing something special for me.
Yeah, and it becomes all about you. I mean, what were what without giving away, everything that's in the book. I mean, what do you think was one of the most significant things, as far as some of the ritual that might have happened that was, really significant to you?
Um, I mean, gosh, there's so many. The weekend was just full of advice and wisdom, and they even gave me some gifts. Like, they gave me letters. They each wrote me a letter. My dad gave me a special memento that his father had given to him. So the whole weekend was kind of chock full of just good experiences. I will say, probably for me, the most meaningful was just sitting down and having advice given to me. Part of the weekend is a discussion called "What It Means to Be a Man." And it's really a discussion of, like, what does it mean to be a good man and how to be a good man. And a lot of the advice that was given to me, I still remember today. Um, Advice like, being a man doesn't necessarily mean being macho. It doesn't necessarily mean having big muscles or having tattoos. Although at times as a man, you will have to be strong. We don't mean to minimize that, but manhood is not just about having big muscles. Manhood is about being in touch with your emotions, being able to connect. If you're married, if you're not in touch with your emotions and being able to communicate with your wife, you're going to be in hot water pretty quick, so
Sleeping on the couch quite a bit.
yeah, you're going to be in the doghouse. So being a man definitely means being in touch with your emotions. Other advice that was given to me was, like, be very careful about who you surround yourself with. I think there's a saying that goes, you are the average of your 5 closest friends, you know, um, and that was, great advice. Um, Definitely advice about respecting women at all times and not using women as objects, but treating them as daughters of God, never being disrespectful towards women. And then definitely advice about maintaining a close relationship with God and the importance of maintaining a strong faith life. One of the elements of the weekend is that we light a fire in a wood stove right as we enter the cabin, and that fire, just as God came to Moses in the form of a burning bush, and fire is a symbol of the Holy Spirit. That fire that we lit in the stove as we entered the cabin was a sign of God's presence throughout the weekend. So once we lit the fire, we didn't let the fire go out until the end of the weekend. And that was, my dad told me, like, we're doing this because it's important for you to have that flame of faith in your life and to never let it get extinguished. Sometimes it'll be hot, sometimes it'll be colder, but the most important thing is to never let it get extinguished fully.
That's gold right there. It really is. And I think there's so many aspects of that kind of wisdom that was passed down that is so pertinent to today, because really that's one of the reasons why them and what those the boys becoming men and what that's going to mean is going to look like, and how it shapes the decisions they make, who they choose to be with, how they approach their sexuality, why that's a gift. Because I mean, I applaud you, Deacon Dave, because the way that it was approached, and in the book, it's something I think that no matter where you are as a father, you can read, even just that chapter, and you can say, I'm glad I read this because I have a better way to approach that. Because for a lot of men, it's intimidating, and unfortunately, we will succumb to that fear and take the easy way out. But if it's not going to be us that's going to teach our boys about true manhood and true virtue and what that means, then it's going to be influences, and you probably won't be happy with how they formulate those ideas of manhood and sexuality. But from your standpoint, Deacon Dave, I mean, maybe what is your message to some of the men that might be intimidated to look into the rite of passage, just because they feel like, well, my son's a little bit different?
Yeah, I would just encourage you to do it because it is for your son, and you will grow through this, and so will all the other guys that are involved in this process. We always did a debriefing afterwards. Typically, we would get together with the newly initiated man of the family. A week or two later, all of us would get together for lunch and just say, okay, what did you like about it? What was uncomfortable? What was awkward? How can we make it better? So every time we did this, we felt like we were getting a little bit better and a little bit better. And now you've got the compilation of all those improvements have been added to it, through the website and through the book. And Rich, if I could just expound on a couple of things that we brought up, about the 13-year-old buying into, well, am I really a man now? There were some things that we did during the weekend. One, for example, that Steve already mentioned, I gave him a gift that was my father's that he had given to me. And, that gift had some value to it. But more than that, it told Steve that, you're at a point now where I trust that you can take care of this. I've taken care of it for the last 20 years, and now I think you can take care of it. And that gives him that little confidence, just a little bit of, yeah, this is a step toward manhood. And then even in his life after the weekend, one of the things our family used to do when we would get all the aunts and uncles and cousins together, we'd have a pretty large gathering. And typically our big gathering was Easter, or Thanksgiving. And just because of the size of the family, we would have a table in the dining room for the adults, and then we'd have a table in the living room for the kids. And it was great. A lot of fun happened that way. But once they went through the rite of passage, They were no longer at the kids' table. They are now at the adults' table. And we interacted with them as if they were adults. So yeah, do they magically become a man that weekend? Well, that's the beginning of it. But they see that as, yeah, that was the point.
The word trust is what emerged in my mind when you talked about the memento. And Steve, I know the recession is probably killing you just like it's killing us over here in California, but no matter what, don't send that thing to the pawn shop, all right?
Yeah, I mean, what is a silver dollar worth today? $50?
Could be, but it's invaluable when it comes to the family legacy, if you think about it.
Yeah,
And I mean,
absolutely. I would never sell it for sure.
tell me, if anything, to the listeners and the viewers, just think of the fact that like this, there's so much intentionality with the rite of passage. I mean, that's really why Milestone to Manhood is such a great investment into doing something so special for your family. And I even if your son is 13 and you want to do something like this going into their 14th birthday, I wouldn't be opposed to it at all, because look, think about how great your son is going to feel that all that attention is on him. Because just like we as husbands, sometimes we don't feel like we're necessarily seen or appreciated. I think the kids feel the same way. And I think that's why, like, I'm a very touchy feely kind of guy, very affectionate. Maybe because I didn't necessarily get that a lot growing up, but maybe that's one of my love languages. But to the boys, I mean, to them, it's really like, I see you, I appreciate you, I love you, and I don't just tell you that. And a lot of times that doesn't come naturally from men. But to have a full weekend of really, deep talks of advice and things that we know that are seeds of faith that are going to go with them the rest of their life. Um, and for me, I part of me, I don't want my son to come home with, crazy girl and say like, this isn't what we talked about at the rite of passage when you're 13. But I'm assuming that the type of advice and wisdom that comes from there, it's all built on that trust in, yes, you are a man now. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. Like you said, being courageous. A lot of the virtues that really come from Saint Joseph, for example, is so crucial. Being chaste. And I think there's so much that can come from that. But for some of the men that might be somewhat intimidated, there are a lot of resources on milestone2manhood.com as well. Stephen, did you have an additional comment you wanted to share?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just to bring this conversation back to our faith, our shared Catholic faith, definitely an aspect of the weekend is to affirm the boy in his manhood. But another part of it is to affirm him in his Catholic identity. And for me, I write in the book about how, when I got to college, by the time I was 19, 20, I started to drift away from my Catholic faith. I, like many people in college, was having questions about what do I believe in and why do I believe it? And I wasn't sure about how to navigate those questions. And part of me felt like, man, maybe I should talk to my dad about this. But a part of me was hesitant to, because I wasn't sure what my parents would think about me having questions about the faith, doubting in God's existence. But ultimately, I remembered back to my Rite of Passage weekend, which at this point was, at this time I'm like 19 years old. So it's probably 6 years previous. I remembered that my grandfather and my dad had both said, if there's anything that you ever want to talk about, we're on your side. You can come to us and talk about anything without judgment. We're not going to get mad at you. We are just here to help you. So if you ever have questions and are feeling a little bit lost in life, we are your resources, we're your guys. And so ultimately in college, I decided, you know what, I do need help and it would be a good idea. So I brought those questions to my dad and to my grandfather, and we had a lot of deep, theological discussions about the nature of life and God and Jesus Christ. And, they weren't able to answer all of my questions, but they were able to encourage me. And, uh, to the point now where it's like my faith is my own. I feel like I've taken it on as a man, and I don't go to church anymore because my parents are taking me there, or because it makes my parents happy. I go to church now because this is what I believe in. And so for me, in a way, I it's hard to say what would have happened otherwise, but I'm not sure that I would be practicing my Catholic faith if it wasn't for this Rite of Passage weekend. So if you're a Catholic father out there who wants to pass down your faith to your son, this Rite of Passage weekend can be a crucial tool for you. It's definitely a great way of doing that.
And the thing about it is you get to do that together. And our faith is a mystery, right? And the curiosity is healthy curiosity. And that there's plenty of times I've said, I may not have all the answers, son, or to my daughter, but I'll say we can find the answers. And the whole point is that they trust in our counsel, and that we can approach it in love, even when it happens to be discipline. But I would tell you that to the viewers and listeners, this really is an amazing book, milestone to manhood. And before we as we start to wrap up, I mean, I would love for you guys to offer up any advice, either you, Deacon Dave, or to you, Steve. Any advice to some of the men that might be intimidated, to help them see the value in grabbing this book on Amazon?
Sure, maybe I could start. As dads, it's our duty to give our sons their identity as men. And as boys, they're going to want to figure this out for themselves. They're going to want to test themselves, whether it be through video games or gangs or conquest of women or whatever it happens to be. But I just want you to know that you're not powerless. We don't have to buy into what society's telling us about men these days. We don't have to be victims. So our sons need to get this message from other men. So it's time for us to stand up as men and give this gift to them, because someone else can't do it, because you can't give what you don't have.
Amen. That's exactly what I was thinking. And I would say that I would love to get some feedback from some of the folks that um, are able to go through the book and share that with us, with myself, with Steve, and Deacon Dave, because I believe that you can get past some of the uncomfortable feelings, but because it truly is our responsibility. These are children. The boys are entrusted to us. Ultimately, they are still God's children, but they are under our guidance and protection. And that is more of the serious side of it, is if you leave them exposed to society, then you can kind of know what to expect, because we're seeing it rampant around us. And as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So if anything, um I'm always trying to put the armor of God on, because I know the attacks are on head of household, the husband, the father, and men in general. And what it means to be a man in today's society is important, because as you said, Deacon Dave, you can't give what you don't have. I appreciate both of you for the work that you've done. I'm going to certainly pray for you and your ministry and everything you're doing for your communities. And Deacon Dave, if you can close in prayer, we would greatly appreciate. We always pray for our listeners and viewers.
Of course, yeah. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May he turn his countenance towards you and give you peace. And may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit descend upon you and remain with you forever. Amen.
Amen. God bless you both. Thank you for everything. Steve, you stay out of trouble in Portland.
Sometimes it's hard to, man.
You know, stay clear. But God bless you both. And, so ladies and gentlemen, this podcast episode has ended. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks
Thanks be to God.